Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, a big weekend for the Wolves. 2 wins on the West Coast. Let's break down the best things that happened to the Wolves this weekend. We'll talk about the offense, really mostly the offense. Also some solid defensive play against the Lakers Friday. But I want to focus on a couple of aspects of the Wolves offense that were fantastic over the weekend and peek ahead at the week upcoming. It's all upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. It was a big weekend for the Timberwolves. 2 huge wins in California. Friday night against Lakers, Friday night against Lakers, Saturday against the Sacramento Kings. I want to talk about key takeaways from the weekend on the show here today. First of all, though, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find this show. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Along with all the other great Locked On Minnesota podcasts, more great local sports coverage 24/7 for free. Download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app today on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at my account, which is at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. All right, so the Timberwolves coming into the day Monday are 6th in the Western Conference. I mean, a week ago on this show, last Monday's show, was in the wake of the Timberwolves' loss to the Warriors last Sunday, which, of course, came on the heels of the loss to Charlotte and before the All-Star break to Washington. So the Wolves had 3 consecutive disappointing losses. Of course, the Wizards and Hornets losses were awful, and then a shorthanded Warriors team in a game they should have won last Sunday. And last Monday, the sky was kind of starting to fall from the sky, if you will. The tone of last Monday's podcast was very different than this one. Suffice it to say, the Timberwolves had a really difficult 4-game road trip to California, Golden State, the Clippers, this finally healthy Clippers team, this retooled Lakers team, and then Sacramento on the second night of a back-to-back on Saturday. Sacramento had been playing great. A week ago, a little more than a week ago, we didn't know LeBron wouldn't be playing. We didn't know D'Lo wouldn't be playing in that Wolves-Lakers game Friday. So things ended up a little bit less daunting. The Clippers win was maybe the most impressive in terms of now, of course, the Clippers have lost a bunch in a row anyway. And, there's a lot of stuff going on with the Clippers as there always is. But because of the stifling defense they played last Tuesday against the Clippers, we talked a lot about that last week. Friday was a nice win over the Lakers, but of course, a shorthanded Lakers team. Anthony Davis had 38. Nobody else on that team really showed much interest in performing last Friday. But the Kings win on Saturday was fantastic. And of course, we do the live postcast on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. Myself and Marnie Gellner from Valley Sports North. After her postgame show on TV, she does the live show here. And if you missed it, actually, the last episode on the audio feed, if you're not watching on YouTube, you're listening anywhere, you can find those live postcasts, the audio we post after the fact, after each Wolves game. So Friday and Saturday are actually your last 2 episodes on the audio feed. So if you want to go back and listen to those, you can. And we go, those are immediate reactions to the game. And so in some ways, a little more in the weeds because they're really specific about what just happened, but they're also shorter shows. So today I want to take the biggest takeaways from the weekend, key in on those a little bit more, summarize both games, really, the Lakers and Kings games, because there's a couple of common threads from those games. Most of today's show is going to be about the offense. We spent a lot of time last week talking defense. I did after the Lakers game too, because of course, Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards, as we talked about last week, were phenomenal against Kawhi Leonard and Paul George last Tuesday. On Friday, it was Dennis Schroeder that was, had his night ruined by primarily Jaden McDaniels, but the Wolves switched everything against the Lakers, were really good defensively. The Kings game, the Kings have the #1 offensive rating in the league, so The fact that they gave up 134 to Sacramento on Saturday wasn't like as horrific as it might sound, because the Kings are a really, really good offense, and the Wolves offense was humming as well. But it also means, like, hey, as much as the Wolves have this defensive identity that held 3 straight teams under 43% shooting, which courtesy of Jace Frederick from the Pioneer Press, I said this on Friday's postcast after Wolves Lakers, only about 20% of the games in the league total this season have had a team shoot under 43% from the field. And the Wolves did that 3 consecutive times last week. Now, the Kings scored a bunch of points Saturday. So I want to key in on offense in this show, in this episode of Locked On Wolves. So let's start there. The first thing is just simply all the shooting percentages. How well the Wolves shot the ball over the weekend was phenomenal. On Friday night against the Lakers, the Wolves shot 47% from the field, which is good, 41% from 3, and 75% from the line. Against the Lakers, the Wolves were 14 of 34 on three-pointers. Anthony Edwards had 19 points. But 15 of those came on made three-point shots. He didn't attempt a single free throw against the Lakers on Friday. So he was 5 of 8 on threes. He was 2 of 8 on twos. The Wolves as a team only attempted 16 free throws, but not a single Anthony Edwards free throw attempt on Friday night against the Lakers. But because they shot the ball so well from everywhere else, they played really well in the paint, besides really Anthony Davis's start. I think he had like 18 in the first quarter, 20-something at halftime, and finished with 38. Nobody else on the Lakers, they only had 2 other players in double figures, and it was Malik Beasley and Lonnie Walker. Like, no other bigs for the Lakers did anything. Jared Vanderbilt had 8 points, had a relatively quiet game. Rui Hachimura had a pretty quiet game off the bench. Mo Bamba only played 11 minutes. This was all about Rudy Gobert, who had a nice 22 and 14 on Friday. Naz Reid was awesome off the bench, 15 and 8, playing against LeBron James, one of his biggest fans, based on LeBron's tweet last week about Naz. So like, just a really good bigs game for Minnesota, good in the paint, good on the glass. They were a +5 on the glass. But the biggest thing to me was the shooting percentages, 47.2% from the floor, 41.2% from 3. They picked their spots. They did just enough offensively to beat this Lakers team by 8. On Saturday against the Kings, the shooting was even better. And this was just an offensive, just like a complete back and forth for these teams. The Wolves shot a astonishing 60% from the floor in this game against the Kings on Saturday. It was amazing. 51.3% from 3, 20 of 39. They made more than half of their 3-point attempts against the Kings. And then at the line, actually wasn't very good, 71%, 22 of 31. But they got there 31 times, which was 1 more than the Kings, and they made the same amount, neither the Wolves or the Kings. For as many points as were scored on Saturday in that game, neither team shot the ball particularly well from the charity stripe. But for the Wolves, Jaden McDaniels, 3 of 5 on threes. Mike Conley, 4 of 8. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 4 of 8. Kyle Anderson, 3 of 3 on three-pointers. Naz Reid, 2 of 3. Everyone that attempted a three-pointer in the game for the Wolves made at least half of them, except for Anthony Edwards. How crazy is that? And by the way, the Wolves had 8 guys shoot threes. They had 8 guys make threes. So they had 9 players play. Take out Rudy Gobert. Everyone else made at least 1 3. And everyone that shot a 3, except for Anthony Edwards, shot 50% or greater from outside the arc. And the Wolves as a team were 51.3%. Just a really strong offensive performance for the Wolves. They got whatever they wanted. Now, the Kings are not a good defensive team. I think that's fair to point out. It's important to point that out. But the ball movement was really, really good. 31 assists to just 11 turnovers for Minnesota. They had 6 more assists than Sacramento. The Wolves only had 6 offensive rebounds, but they had a couple of really timely putback slams, one by Jaden McDaniels, one by Rudy Gobert in the fourth quarter. I actually think they had 3 during that stretch. They only had 6 offensive rebounds, but the ones they had, they made them count. The Wolves also were overall a +1 on the glass. They won on the glass in both of these games too. But again, the point here is the shooting. Just phenomenal. 47% against the Lakers from the floor, 60% against the Kings. 41% on threes against the Lakers, 51% on threes against the Kings, and over 70% in each game at the line as well. But again, it was more about the volume, especially against the Kings, than it was the accuracy from the free throw line. So a phenomenal all-around shooting game for the Timberwolves in both games. These were balanced performances as well. And I want to talk a little bit more about that next, the balance. I want to talk about the improvement in taking care of the ball and also a couple of individual players that had really good weekends. And then, less of a emphasis, but an area where the Wolves still need to improve a little bit. So we're going to do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at PrizePicks. On Tuesday night, the Wolves don't play Monday, but on Tuesday, against the Philadelphia 76ers, I would take, I don't know. I think I would take perhaps Mike Conley over on threes. It feels like, I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm guessing it's like 1.5 or something like that. Mike Conley's going to shoot some threes against the Sixers. I think the Wolves offense is humming now, and Conley's going to be a beneficiary of some wide open catch and shoot threes. That'll be a fun one to track. If you're not familiar with PrizePicks, it's really easy to use. You just pick 2 to 6 players, and if they'll score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry, and you're not competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That, of course, includes the NBA, as well as college basketball. We're going into conference tournament week, and then the actual tournament here soon. Of course, women's college basketball as well. Really any other sport, NHL, etc. It's all there. You can make your entry in less than 60 seconds. It really is that easy. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with your promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right. So the Timberwolves offense was relatively well balanced over the weekend. And what I mean by that is there was no single dominant scorer really in either game. So, like, for instance, Friday night against the Lakers, the Timberwolves were led by Rudy Gobert's 22 points. Ant had 19 on 16 shots. Conley had 14. Nas had 15 off the bench. So they had 5 guys that scored 13 or more points in this game, and only one player that scored more than 20 points, and their high point score was 22 from Rudy. Saturday against the Kings, there were just a lot more points scored, so the Timberwolves had 7 guys scoring double figures, but they only had 2 guys score more than 20. Anthony Edwards with 27 and a nice, efficient 10 of 20 shooting, 27 points on 20 shots. And Mike Conley had 24 on a really efficient 12 shots. Nobody else scored more than 19 points for the Wolves. Ant's performance wasn't like ultra high volume. Again, the Wolves had 31 assists in this game and made over half of their 3-point attempts. So well balanced, extremely well balanced for the Wolves, which is a sign of good ball movement, right? The bench in both games against the Lakers, it was Naz Reid and Taurean Prince that did a lot of the damage for the Wolves. They combined for 28 points on 10 of 23 shooting. That includes 4 of 11 on 3-pointers, a perfect 4-4 at the line. Again, Prince and Naz combined really good on Friday. On Saturday, it was Naz combining with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They combined for 26 points on 8 of 14 shooting, including 6 of 11 on threes. So I think that's the same number as the other night. 4 of 11 for Prince and Reid on Friday, 6 of 11 for Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid combined on Saturday. They combined to shoot 4 of 7 at the free throw line, have 6 assists and no turnovers. That's Naz and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Again, 26 points on 16 shots on Saturday. So Wolves bench, Naz really good both nights. Really, the bench as a whole really good both nights. I didn't mention Jordan McLaughlin at all. He's the 4th guy off the bench in each of those games. And he played well. He just didn't, he didn't shoot the ball great. He was against the Lakers? He was 1 of 5, 0 of 3 outside the arc, 1 of 3 against the Kings. But McLaughlin played well. Friday, in fact, was typical Jordan McLaughlin. He led the team in plus minus in just 17 minutes, a plus 11, had 6 assists, no turnovers against the Lakers. And he was solid against the Kings, although he only played 3 second half minutes because Alexander Walker played so well and Conley was playing so well. The Wolves just didn't need a whole lot of McLaughlin in the second half against Sacramento. But all that to say, a well-balanced offensive attack, which was great. And I alluded to this a little bit ago. The lack of turnovers for the Wolves was huge. Minnesota, after this weekend, including these games, is averaging 15.7 turnovers per game. So we'll say they were averaging a solid 16 per game. Not solid, a flat 16 per game. It's not a good number. 16 per game coming into the weekend. That is 28th in the league in terms of turnovers per game. It's 28th in turnover rate league-wide, which is, again, not good. 3rd worst, 28th, about 14% turnover rate. So they're turning the ball over on 14% of their offensive possessions, which is really not good. However, this weekend, they only turned it over 11 times against the Lakers on Friday. They only turned it over 13 times against Sacramento in a really high-paced game with a ton of possessions on Saturday. So I don't know what that rate is. I guess Basketball Reference does post those. I could have pulled it, but the single game turnover rates. But I'd be willing to bet that the 13 on Saturday is actually as good of a rate, if not lower, than the 11 on Friday, just because there were so many possessions used in the Sacramento game. It was so fast-paced. So 24 total turnovers between the two games, averaging 12 per game over those two when they're averaging 16 per game on the season. By the way, Anthony Edwards had 9 of the Timberwolves' 24 turnovers this weekend. 9 of the 24. So, I mean, obviously more than a third of them, right? The quick math would tell me, I'm not going to try and do the quick math, but basically, well, yeah, I don't know. More than a third of them. We'll just leave it there. More than a third of the Timberwolves turnovers were Anthony Edwards. Conley, between the two games, had only 1 turnover total between Friday and Saturday. Kyle Anderson only had 2 total turnovers. Those are the other guys who are initiating offense in addition to Edwards. We have seen, and of course, you glance at that and it's like, oh, well, Edwards is initiating a lot of offense. Well, yes, he is, but Conley's been doing a lot more of that, right? The Wolves offense has shifted a bit since Mike Conley has joined the fray. It's less point ant than we saw before the All-Star break, before the trade deadline, really. So Edwards is committed these 9 turnovers. Conley's still kind of the straw that stirs the drink, and he just committed only 1 turnover combined between those two games, and that was in 61 minutes. 1 turnover to 6 assists. Now, of course, he only had the 6 assists because Conley's initiating, but then he's ultimately getting the ball to Ant, and Ant is still, the Wolves are calling plays to get Ant off dribble handoffs and pick and roll isolation. Like, Ant is still the offense, right? It's just Conley bringing the ball up the floor, so he's more point guard in name, but we're still seeing less of, quote unquote, point Ant than we saw before. But again, Ant commits 9 turnovers total between the two games. Conley only 1, Kyle Anderson only 2. And the Wolves as a team only 24, averaging 12 per game. So much better taking care of the basketball than we've seen for the vast majority of the season. And that's progress that hopefully stays. Like, hopefully that's not going anywhere. If this team could be, and part of this, and Marty and I talked about this the other night, part of this is that like veteran pulse of the team, maintain the composure. Mike Conley brings that to the table. That is a primary reason why he would have been a target for this front office to bring in, is because Conley is that. He's a consummate professional. And I said this to Marty the other night too, after Saturday night's Kings game. Look at this, we'll call it a young people call it a young Timberwolves team. Well, yeah, because everybody talks about Ant and Jaden McDaniels, and rightfully so, throwing Karl-Anthony Towns, and he's not like he's old. But like, who are the ones getting the big minutes down the stretch? I mean, the starting lineup has Mike Conley, Kyle Anderson, and Rudy Gobert in it. Those guys aren't young. Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley are on the wrong side of 30. Kyle Anderson is 29. He turns 30 this fall. So like, it's not a super inexperienced team. You got a couple of 30-year guys in McDaniels and Edwards. Taurean Prince coming off the bench. You got a few guys that have 3-4 years under their belt in Nas, McLaughlin, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They don't have any rookies receiving rotation minutes. They don't have any second-year guys receiving rotation minutes. So for all this talk about a really young Wolves team, this is suddenly a fairly veteran team with 3 of 5 starters that are 29 or older. And those are guys closing at crunch time too. So, that's not good or bad. It's just more of an observation than anything else. But yeah, lack of turnovers was a really big part of this. You turn the ball over a bunch against the Kings, they're going to make you pay because they want to play fast. Lakers want to play fast too. And Minnesota did a really good job. That Lakers game, the only really bad stretch the Wolves had was when they turned it over like 5 out of 7 possessions early in that game. That was like, I think it was late first quarter after they'd built a nice lead. Suddenly it was just constantly giving the ball up. And other than that, that Lakers game was really clean. And the Kings game, third quarter wasn't great. The Kings went on that extended, what was it, like a 19-6 run or something to close the quarter. That was more bad shot selection than it was turnovers. But overall, turnovers were just suppressed in this 2-game stretch for the Wolves. And against Philadelphia Tuesday, we'll preview that on Tuesday, tomorrow's show. But that's going to be a key to try and limit those turnovers to keep the Sixers from hurting them on turnovers. But hopefully some real progress here for Minnesota. All right. One more observation from the weekend. I guess 2 more. One more positive one. Another thing to kind of keep an eye on. And then we'll take a quick peek at the upcoming schedule. We'll do all that here as we close the show today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, then you have to try Built Bar. We are now into March, and my goal is I'm doing okay, but my goal is to still eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me and you want to eat healthier, but you don't want to compromise taste, then I've got just the thing for you. You have to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't even think that they're good for you. They're perfect for those of you that are still on that New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate, and they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter, brownie, and coconut almond. I don't know how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they're actually healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't even need to wait around to get a box. For years at Locked On Wolves, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. You can still do that, but now you can also get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to Sam's Club, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box with their hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. Just make sure that you thank me later. All right, closing the show here today. One more positive observation from the Wolves' wins over the Lakers and Kings this weekend on back-to-back games, by the way. Friday, Saturday, consecutive nights, consecutive wins. Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And I barely mentioned him so far. The fact that I'm over 20 minutes into this podcast and didn't mention him, shame on me. He has been really an absolute revelation since joining the Timberwolves. I'm going to pull up his Timberwolves stats here really quick. In 7 games, he's averaging 7.7 points per game, 2 rebounds per game. But more importantly, he's shooting 50% from outside the arc, which is insane. The number is 12 of 24. So that's good volume over 7 games. It's still only 7 games. And this is a guy whose career number from outside the arc, and we talked about this when the Wolves traded for him, a shade under league average, right? About 34% or so. He was 40% so far this year with Utah. And again, now 50% with the Wolves. So on the season, he's shooting 42% from 3. Last year, split between New Orleans and Utah, he was 31%. And his first 2 seasons in the league, he was about 34.5%. So he's always been below league average, but this season is solidly above league average on, less volume than the last couple of years. But he's also been really, really good defensively for the Wolves. And this is a guy who's, the eye test has always been better than what the advanced metrics say. He's never graded out well in most advanced metrics. The on-ball defense isn't quite what perhaps it should be based on his size and athleticism. But with the Wolves, he's been really good defensively. There's no denying that. And again, size, athleticism. What I've been most impressed with has been his what appears to be a really strong basketball IQ on both ends of the floor. Extremely active defensively, wants the tough assignments. On offense, he makes quick decisions. And a lot of times these young players, and McDaniels has been guilty of it the first couple of years, and at times, both have been much better this year, but decision-making just isn't quick. They get the ball, they wait a beat or 2 or 3, and then they make a decision, which is often the wrong one. But to make the decision quickly is, if you choose wrong quicker, that's better than standing there holding the ball and then choosing wrong. Like Alexander Walker is swinging the ball, like he's moving the ball when he gets it, or he's dribbling into, more often than not, he's shooting threes. And there's been a couple off the dribble where I kind of think, not a good shot. And then it seems to go in, all the time. I mean, I guess it's literally going in half the time, but I think the decision-making has been the most impressive thing. And defensively, again, the IQ, the understanding of where he needs to be and when, all that stuff has been really, really great for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And I would say that the combination of Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Taurean Prince, you're not going to find too many wing combos off the bench that are much better than that. And Jalen Noel's still out. Austin Rivers has had DNP CDs the last 2 games. He's not playing currently. He's out of the rotation. When Noel comes back, there's really no reason to put him into the game unless you're trailing by a bunch and you need some offense. And I think that's going to kind of be the role for Noel moving forward. In games where the Wolves are struggling to score or whatever, or maybe there's foul trouble, perhaps Noel gets some run. But otherwise, Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a better defender. This season, he's been a better shooter. with the Wolves, with the Jazz, doesn't matter. Over 42% for the season. And Jalen Noel's under 30% from three. He's had his worst shooting season of his career after having such a strong, first part of the season, strong, very start to the season. Noel on the season is 29.3% for three. And he's a bad defender. So why would you give Noel those minutes? The other thing is now Jordan McLaughlin's back, right? If McLaughlin wasn't healthy, then you might still want Noel to kind of run some offense. He can run pick and roll, probably more comfortable doing that than Alexander-Walker. But McLaughlin's playing. Taurean Prince is healthy. Naz Reid's using up a lot of your possessions anyway off the bench, so you don't need Noel to use those possessions to generate offense. It's Naz Reid and it's Jordan McLaughlin initiating. Prince and Alexander-Walker spot up shooting. That's not bad. Prince has been your best three-point shooter, technically not named Kyle Anderson, but like outside of Ant and Cat when he was healthy and D'Lo when he was on the team, like Taurean Prince is the guy. He's the only other guy that can like confidently space the floor and other teams worry about him. So that's a pretty nice bench unit. Running McLaughlin, Naz pick and roll with Alexander-Walker and Prince spacing and cutting. Both those guys are good spacers. They're good cutters. That's a nice bench. Those are nice wing pieces to have in Prince and Alexander-Walker. And Alexander-Walker has been an absolute revelation as a new addition to this Timberwolves team thus far. All right, one thing to keep an eye on for the Wolves. Opponent free throw attempts continues to be a bugaboo for Minnesota. This season, the Timberwolves are 23rd in opponent free throw opponent free throw rate. The Wolves give up the eighth most, would be another way to say this, free throw attempts per field goal attempts for opponents this season. Friday against the Lakers, 24 free throw attempts, which isn't the end of the world. Well, actually, let's do it this way. I could just tell you what they give up per game. The Wolves allow opponents to shoot 26 free throws per game, which is 29th league-wide. So you ask what the discrepancy is there. Well, free throw rate is, of course, a rate-based stat. So because the Wolves play so fast, they play at the third greatest pace in the league, and there's a ton of possessions, there's more opportunities to get to the line. So that's why the rate isn't quite as bad. But they allow 26 free throws per game, which is 29th in the league. Only one team allows more free throw attempts for opponents per game. So the Wolves are allowing 26 free throw attempts per game. Against the Lakers, they allowed 24. On Saturday against the Kings, the Wolves allowed the Kings to shoot 30 free throws in that game. Individually, Naz Reid was in some foul trouble. Nobody else had more than 4. Rudy and Naz actually kind of alternated being in foul trouble. McDaniels and Edwards picked up some cheapies. But for the most part, that was an issue this weekend for the Wolves. Opponent free throw rate. I'll add this as a side note that we can come back to maybe later in the season. Well, the season's almost over. Maybe by the playoffs. Opponents are actually shooting the worst percentage. Let me think of a better way to say this. The Wolves have how do I want to say this? The Wolves have only allowed opponents to shoot 75, quote unquote, allowed opponents to shoot 75.6% from the free throw line. That's the worst opponent free throw shooting percentage in the league, meaning that the other 29 teams have their opponents shoot better at the line against them. It's completely luck, right? There's no, you're not actually defending the free throw line when they're shooting free throws, obviously. So what I mean by that is the Wolves are allowing a ton of free throws per game, but they've had good luck in terms of opponents missing a lot of free throws. Fingers crossed that stays the case and it doesn't come back to bite them, but they've had good luck. Teams are only making about 3/4 of their free throw attempts against the Wolves, which is the league's worst mark / best from the Wolves side, but worse from the opposing offensive side, if that makes sense. So that's just something to kind of file away and pay attention to that. So opponent free throw rate is an issue. And then the other thing, this on the other side of the ball for the Wolves over the weekend that wasn't ideal occasionally was shot selection. I mentioned that was the big problem in the third quarter against the Kings when Sacramento made their comeback. It was maybe less of a problem against the Lakers, but the ball movement has generally been better for the Wolves over these two games, but the shot selection was still questionable. And a lot of that's Ant, just getting excited and being Ant. But that's just something to keep in mind here moving forward. All right. That's really all for the show. Peeking ahead to the week, the Timberwolves have the Philadelphia 76ers on Tuesday. That's a national TV game. That's TNT. It's a 6:30 Central game. So it's a 6:30 Central tip. So it's the early game on TNT on Tuesday. We will do the postcast with Marnie. It will actually be right after. It's TNT, so Bally does not have the game. So Marnie will be available to do the postcast immediately following. So if it's a normal, length, 2 hours, 15 minutes or so, we'll go live right around 9 o'clock Central against Philly after the Philly game on Tuesday. Then the Wolves have, again, 2 days off. So they had Sunday, Monday off, play Tuesday. They get Wednesday, Thursday off, play at home against Brooklyn on Fridays. They spend the week at home, Philadelphia Tuesday at 6:30, Brooklyn Friday at 7. Then they get 2 more days off, Saturday, Sunday off, as they let the rest of the league catch up to how many games the Wolves have played this year, because they've played a ton. They get 2 more days off before playing at Atlanta on Monday. So a ton of off days upcoming, only 2 games in the next 7 days for Minnesota, 2 games in the next 8 days. So a good opportunity to get some rest, pick up a couple more wins against some good teams, Philadelphia and Brooklyn, and try and solidify this 6th spot and perhaps even move up a spot or 2 in the West here as we get closer to going down the stretch of the regular season. All right, that's all we have for you today here on the show. A big thank you to those that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. It's absolutely greatly appreciated. You can, of course, watch on YouTube as well as listen wherever you listen to podcasts. It's free and available everywhere. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Again, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Now make your second listen the Game to Game NBA podcast. Every moment, every top performance, and every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.